Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear okay? Is the volume good? Thank you. Good evening, John Sanders. How are you? Thanks all for coming and for the topic tonight. We all love the sport that we do, and we all love to hear stories of people that excel at the sport that we love. We're very fortunate to have Rob Greenhalgh with us tonight. Thank you. Rob's pretty much full-time professional sailor working for us in North Wales in Sydney. 5-time Volvo sailor, 1-time winner. Is that right?
Yep.
Multiple world champion, I don't know how many. You count the JJ 18-foot skiff series as well, there's a few of them in there as well, is that correct? Sydney to Hobart winner. How many people have done Sydney Hobart? Bit hard to win, isn't it? I've done one as well, very hard to win. Transatlantic record holder on Comanche. What did you do? 5 days? 3,000 miles in 5 days, 5.5 days. You guys do the math pretty quick. I'll hand you over to Rob with, but thanks all for coming, it's a great crowd to see. And over to Rob for a few stories on some of his adventures over the years. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks for having me here. You know, please feel free to ask questions at any stage, but what I was going to do is sort of run through my experience in the Volvo Ocean Race, which has been since 2005 now, 5 races. You know, lots of interesting stories, but I'll sort of try to keep it sort of technical stuff, which we were all interested in. And I'll focus more on this latest race, which I think is probably more prominent in people's minds. But we'll run through the early days of since I've been involved, which is since 2005, and which started the era of Volvo, the Volvo 70s. I'm sure people will remember back to the race before this in probably 01, 02, which was the Volvo 60 era, which was Ilbrook won that race. Boats like Silk Cup were in it, and all sorts. I think they came into Australia. In fact, they did the Sydney Hobart race. They came into Sydney, didn't they? And did the Hobart race. But the 2005 race signalled the start of a new era of sailing, which was canting keel boats, and the evolution of the Volvo 70, which was you know, a bit of a voyage of discovery for the race. No one really quite knew about the boats and what was going to happen. But off we went. You know, I was very lucky to get the call up from Mike Sanderson to come and join his team of ABN AMRO, which we didn't really know much about. Roy Heiner had put the team together, a Dutch guy who had found the bank, ABN AMRO in Holland, and got a lot of money out of them, you know, to the tune of 30, 40, 50 million euros. I think ultimately spent 50 million euros. During the whole process, Roy Heiner got sacked as skipper and never actually made it on the boat. But he sort of stayed involved with the team, and Mike Sanderson was asked to join as skipper. The design was who's now very famous, Wang Kei, whose surname I can't pronounce. He, at the time, you know, it was thought that this is a ridiculous boat designer. Everyone had far boat designs, and we were showing up with this Wang Kei boat, and no one was really sure what was going to happen. So as I was saying, yeah, we ended up, you know, very lucky to have this boat, really. Pure luck, not luck, but you know, fortunate. Everyone was designing far boats. We showed up with our Wang Kei boat. We had a lot of money, so we had 2 boats. And the first boat we built was pretty good, and went on to our sort of B team, the youth team. And then we went on to build the second boat, the black boat, which basically, you know, you learn so much from building the boat. The second boat we built was 1 ton lighter, and the rules were quite open, so we were able to develop a much, much faster boat, with the second one we built. And we went on to win the race pretty convincingly. And you know, it was a chaotic race though, because we're all learning, you know, learning these new boats, canting keel, which it was very new. And there were, I'm sure you might better remember that, there were lots of breakages, lots of boats failing. The first night at sea coming out of Spain, I think 3 boats pulled out. So one Pirates of the Caribbean pulled out, and they ended up going on an aeroplane down to Cape Town. Telefonica pulled out, went on a ship down to Cape Town. Other boats had to go back to port. As a result, only 2 or 3 boats got to Cape Town. So it was a bit of a mismatch, really. There was an Australian entry, can't remember what it started off life as, but I don't even think they started in the end, and rejoined the race later. So here's a little recap of the race, especially the sort of first leg.
This is no ordinary race. Careers, families, even lives are on the line.
There were 10 very, very determined people on that boat. We weren't stepping into that life raft.
On board, it's a heroic battle.
Lean on, lean on!
Behind the scenes, reputations are shattered.
I had 0 faith in the boat and keep fixing it right now.
What was wrong? The drawing was wrong. Therefore, it does fit. Keep working. My name is drawn out of the happy style.
Rules are bent to breaking point.
A lot of bullshit.
We've suspended racing.
That's cheating for me.
I think you'd have to put this to the board.
Everything is harder and faster than ever before.
Feels like I've been your hell back.
Definitely haven't seen waves like that in my entire life.
So there was oil everywhere. Hydraulic fluid, no fan.
Soaking wet, whole boat is dripping. It is life at the extreme.
And it's true what they say, the worst things do happen at sea.
Fellas, this is Volvo Ocean Race headquarters. If the keel falls off, it'll flip upside down in a matter of seconds. We're looking at 50, 55, 60 knots of wind.
How long will it be when it stay working?
I mean, we're talking big waves. Very big waves. Life and death.
Achieving your lifelong dreams.
Such a special moment. This is my Olympic medal, this is my climbing of Mount Everest, this is my childhood dream.
But prepared to pay the ultimate price.
We initiated basic life support CPR, and that's really all you can do.
No one wants to face their own mortality.
And all for the glory of winning.
Yeah, so that was my first race back in 2005, and you know, there was a lot of chaos. There were boats breaking left, right and centre, and all sorts going on. Reality, you know, as I said, we were sort of kissed there really with our yacht design. We had the only boat with 2 rudders, and it was, you know, transformation at times. We were 3 or 4 knots faster than other boats, so we could win races by a long way. Inshore we weren't any good when we did the import races because we were a bit of a stickier boat, but when we got out into the ocean we could just sail away from people. And to be honest, if you know, the designer came with the package, it wasn't like we chose one, and given a different day and a clean sheet of paper, we may well not have chosen him to design our boat and gone with a more conventional phar design, or someone better known. But as it turned out, you know, it turned out to be the magic touch, and you know, really the thing that started Wang Kei's career as a yacht designer. So then moving on to the 0809 race, and now I joined PUMA for that race. But obviously everyone knew about Volvo 70s now and knew what you needed, and the answer to that was a WAN K boat. Unfortunately, WAN K now knew he was worth a bit of money, so he signed exclusively with Ericsson, and he designed 2 boats for Ericsson for that race, and no other team. So we had a Puma. Puma was a boat in Carkeek, which wasn't a bad boat. There were 2 Telefonica boats, which were Farr boats. So Bruce Farr had learned from his previous problems in the race before, and he put 2 rudders on his boat. Essentially, the Ericsson boats could outsail anyone. They were quite a bit quicker. They had a big budget. They were spending probably similar money to what we spent the race before, 50 million euros, that sort of thing. But the Ericsson boats were able to outsail everybody really. And as a result, without surprise, the sort of design race won again. We finished second on Puma, which we're pretty happy with. We had a good battle around the world. Won a leg or so, but it was generally going the Ericsson way. This race also saw the fleet going up into Asia. So instead of doing like the previous race, we'd come up to near Perth. I think we went round Eclipse Island off Albany. I think actually Brazil won, snapped their mast and ended up in Perth during 05, and then got trucked across Australia. So instead of coming across the Southern Ocean, we went from Cape Town up to India. First time the race had gone up there, and then from India to Singapore, and then up to China after that. And I think essentially after the 05 race, there was pressure from sponsors to take the race to accessible places in Asia where they're going to get some coverage. So from there on, we've seen the race going up across the equator again, and then up into Asia. And that was the 0809 race was the first one to do that. I think Ericsson had a lot of work in India. That's the main reason for going there. But then rolled on to the 2011-2012 race. Again, fleet numbers were always being a bit thin on the ground. We were always struggling to get 6 or 7 boats. And it was clear if you wanted to win the race, you needed to spend a lot of money. So one way they combated this was to stop 2-boat teams. Previously, ABN AMRO, we had 2 boats. You build one boat, and then you build your next boat, which is better, and then you test them against one another, and you can really make a very fast boat. Ericsson did that the same in the next race. Both teams would stand out better than anyone else. So they banned 2-boat teams, hoping that they'd get a closer race. WAN K, the now mega yacht designer, who you had to have, instead of him doing a 1-boat exclusive, he signed up to 3 teams. So he did a design for Groupama, the eventual winners, Telefonica, and Puma. And that was his deal. He said he'd sign 3 teams and do packages for them. So those 3 teams all had a WAN K design. I was with Abu Dhabi this time, and we'd gone with a Farr design, and yeah, it was kind of chalk and cheese. Having been on the fastest boat in the fleet to then being on essentially the slowest, it's pretty tricky. And we've all been on quick boats and slow boats, and when it's easy, it's easy. So again, WAN K still had a big edge of the yacht design world, and the other Farr really wasn't able to keep up. Camper were there with a boat-in boat. It was not bad, but it couldn't handle the WAN K boats. But yeah, then by this stage, Volvo 70s were kind of the quickest monohulls in the world. There were a few 100-footers around, but I remember we did a fastnet race against. It was Leopard. It's not one of the the very, very good 100s, but you could easily just burn off any of these 100-footers. I mean, boats like Comanche now are quicker, but Volvo 70s were truly fast boats. They just kept on going faster and faster and faster and faster. And really, it was the person hanging onto the boat, which was what the limiting factor was. It was getting washed off the boat or waves breaking over you, and trying to hold on to the boat. The boat would just keep going faster and faster and faster. They were absolutely amazing machines, and the sailors loved sailing them, that's for sure. We used to have a lot of fun, and you know, it was full on sailing around at 30 knots regularly. And you know, hard work though, 10 guys on a 70-footer, a lot of sails to move around all the time, and you know, a lot of full-on sailing, a lot of grinding. But it was quite a phenomenal boat. There's a little video of just some of the thrills and spills of Volvo 70 before we move on to Volvo 65 world. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Yeah, so Volvo 70, definitely one of the best boats I've ever sailed, but they were relentless every day. Even if there was 12 knots of wind, you'd be getting out of your bunk, getting all your wet weather gear on, getting on deck, getting fire hosed, and then eventually getting back downstairs. They were absolutely brutal, and they weren't, the race wasn't going to continue if we stayed in Volvo 70 because the money involved was way too much, and there was just, you know, the fleet spread out too much, and it wasn't really a spectator sport, so to speak. It was good sailing, but it was maybe a bit full on. During that last race of Volvo 70s, well before the end of it, Volvo announced that they were going to change the class for the 2014-2015 race because they were nervous. Well, there wasn't enough entries basically. Costs were way too high, and they only had 6 or 7 entries, which isn't quite enough. So they decided upon a Volvo 65 design, or one design class, which was going to be designed by Bruce Farr, which was immediately people were a bit negative about because we all knew that Wank was designing much faster, much better boats than Bruce Farr, and although everyone understands a one design concept, you still want the best one design you can make at the time. So there was a bit of negative, attitude about it all, and no one was really quite sure what was going to happen with Volvo 65. The Volvo 70s has been so good that suddenly people were feeling that the Volvo 65 was maybe a step backwards, and was it what the race was all about, etc. But Volvo, which I totally agree with, they needed to produce a product which people would come and enter. So they're aiming for ideally 18s. We never quite got there. Slightly different course. So we weren't going to go to the Middle East anymore. We did go to the Middle East, went into Abu Dhabi, and then avoided China, but up to China again. Avoided India, then up to China. The first race was slightly complicated because there was a pirate issue in the Middle East, so we had to take the boats to the Maldives and then ship them. It was a bit of a complication, but it also happened. They're aiming to make the race very media friendly, so we had onboard reporters, so a crew member who came with us solely for the purpose of filming us, writing stories and doing all sorts of things. They could, they did a lot of cooking and that sort of stuff, but mostly to, just to try to promote the race and get it going, because things had dwindled a little bit. So the start of the race, it was tricky. I remember at the beginning of the 2014-15 race, people weren't really sure, the teams were very different in that the budgets were much lower, and Volvo were really trying to push, they were saying you could do the race for 10 million, whereas it sounds like a big number, but we're all used to this race costing 30, 40, 50 million. So teams weren't really jumping up to the mark right off the money. I remember Abu Dhabi, who eventual winners quite comfortable in the end, were first out, so they were pretty sorted. Other teams were very late to the plate, and I kind of felt there was a bit of bad PR for just for the boats, in that people were thinking, they're a bit rubbishy and that sort of thing. There were some very long legs involved in the race, which wasn't that attractive to sailors. And in general, I just kind of felt there was a slightly, less appetite to do the race, and everyone was a bit sort of apprehensive about how it was all going to map out until we got into it, to be honest. So let me just go back there, actually. Yeah, until we started sailing, and then the race was amazing. Suddenly we're out racing with a one design fleet, where normally you wake up in your Volvo 70 and you wouldn't expect to see another boat. You wake up in the Volvo 65 and you see the entire fleet for the whole day, days and days on end. And actually it's quite pleasant when you lose sight of the boat, whereas with the Volvo 70 it was quite nice to see another boat. Now we're in a situation where, when there's a boat alongside you for 24 hours, all day, all night, 7 days a week, it's pretty frustrating that you can't shake them off. So it was actually occasionally quite nice to lose sight of them. But by the end of the 14-15 race, the sailors came away from it and said that was pretty amazing. It was kind of the most intense racing you could ever do. Volvo 70 was relentless, punishing, painful, everything, and you often, I guess it also happens with the handicap rules a bit. You can sort of hide behind the handicap. You can hide behind your boat design a bit in a Volvo 70, and that you can say, well, we weren't as quick for whatever, because the boat design, the sail design. In the 65, we all knew it just came down to sailors, and the racing was just unbelievable. And it was only really probably midway through that 14-15 race when the teams were all getting on the pace, and everyone bought into what it was all about. It was all about tacking on small wind shifts again. It wasn't just about putting the hammer down and trying to be faster than someone else. You had to be fast, but you had to go the right way, because you couldn't blame anything else. It was pretty clear why people were leading. It was just, it came down to the basics of sailing. So suddenly, by the end of that race, it was an eye-opener. It was like, wow, this is amazing. We have to do the next race. And by this stage I joined the Spanish for the 14-15 race, and you know, we were very late into it. We launched a month before the start of the race with no big expectations, but ultimately everyone wants to win or do as well as they can. So we finished a kind of disappointing fourth, but not too upset. But we certainly came out of it saying the 2017-2018 race, let's give it a good nudge and see what we can do. And I think, you know, this 17-18 race, by this stage there was lots of teams who were, you know, who were very keen to do it. All the sailors now were talking about the race again, which they hadn't been for quite a while now. Even Volvo 70 days, it was, you know, people were talking about it, just the excitement of it, but now it was a real race, a proper one design race, cutthroat around the world, and everyone wanted to be part of it. The boats, admittedly, they're not Volvo 70s, you know, but one thing was quite nice about that, you don't have to put your jacket on every day. You can stay dry, you can get a better night's sleep, and it's not quite as vicious. And ultimately, they're not, although they're quite a bit slower, on a 20-day leg, you're only getting in a day or two after a Volvo 70 would have gotten. So it's not life-changing, really. So anyway, 2017-2018 race, we got going early. We had our boat, because we bought the boat for the previous race. We used the same boat twice around the world. And we got set up in Spain with our training base. And we're out training, we did lots of good training. We snapped a mast quite early in the piece, which was slightly costly, but it wasn't the end of the world. Leg zero, we had a good setup with Dongfeng, the Chinese-French boat, where we did a lot of two-boat testing with them. We did about a month of two-boat testing with them, and they were quicker than us all the time, just non-stop. That was just kind of a bit of a hang-up from the previous race, where Dongfeng, they didn't win the race, they came second, but they were fast, you know, they were like unbelievably fast. And we did a month of tuning with them, and they just smacked us every time. And we were like, this is ridiculous. This boat's meant to be one design, and we were just getting thumped left, right, and centre. And you know, there was always this rumour around about the Dongfeng boat being dodgy and all sorts of stuff, which it turned out it was normal as everyone else's, but they were doing things a little bit differently. And it was interesting that it took a little while in this race we'll talk about in a minute about, you know, how to make the boats go real quick.
Mapfre entered this edition with the aim of being the first Spanish entry to win the Volvo Ocean Race.
Winning this race, winning this Volvo Ocean Race this time, of course, will be very, very important for me personally, for the team, which we've been together a long time now, and for the whole country, I guess, because we've been trying to win it a lot of years now, and we've been very close before, especially 2011 and 12 with Telefonica. That's why we are working every day towards that. We will fight every day to try to win this race.
Xavi Fernandez co-skippered Mapfre's 2014-15 entry, finishing fourth, and now as skipper for this edition, he pulled together a dream team. Spain's top flight navigator Juan Villa was a star recruit. 15 years after winning aboard Pilgrim Challenge in 2001, Villa stepped aboard with 4 editions under his belt, plus 8 America's Cup campaigns, 3 of them wins. Xavi and Juan's respect for each other has been a cornerstone of their campaign.
Xavi is an excellent leader, and he leads by example. Just need to follow really what he does, and it's pretty easy.
Rob Greenhalgh, the hardy Brit and highly respected watch captain, raced with Xavi during Mapfre's 2014 campaign and returned for round 2, as did Antonio Cubas Mons, Nettie, an all-round talent and Mr. Fix-It, and the only sailor among the fleet to have his own travelling family. Fernandez, an Olympic gold and silver medalist and 49er, is from the Basque region of Spain, where physical and mental toughness is prized. And he set out to complete the race with the same talented sailors he started with. Mapfre were tipped as pre-race favourites for their strength of crew, committed sponsor and longer preparation time. They set out with a clear game plan.
Everybody's going to have this moment, and for us that's why our goal is to start well and make sure we don't have very bad results at the beginning.
And it worked. From Elizabeth Lisbon to Cape Town, they hung on to leg 2 leaders Dongfeng Race Team and waited for their opportunity. And when the Chinese team made one error, they pounced to clinch podium victory, plus a valuable extra leg win point. On leg 3, a Southern Ocean roller coaster dominated by a ball of weather rolling over the fleet from behind battered the boats and crew. They repeated the trick, overhauling Dongfeng Race Team again to fly into Melbourne with another bullet and the overall lead by 6 points.
So we could pass them, and then it's been all good for us. Yes, it's been hard. We kept close, and then we took our.
I think that's the end of that. Yeah, so that got us into Melbourne. We we started the race very well. There was a funny leg out of the Mediterranean where we came second in, which was a very good result because the kind of results were turned on their head a little bit. We won down to Cape Town, overtaking Dongfeng, which kind of they were our nemesis because they were very, very quick. And then we won into Melbourne. Again, it seemed that us and Dongfeng had a big jump over the rest of the fleet speed-wise. And this is the jump which Dongfeng had in the previous race, but didn't really capitalise on it then. And what it came down to was canting the keel in sort of a slightly strange way. Seems that this Volvo 65, the way the keel pin is angled, actually it liked the keel being decanted at high speeds. So even when reaching, once the boat speed was over 16 knots, we would actually use less keel cant, and which would essentially reduce the drag on the keel, and the boat speed, would shoot up quite quickly. So us and Dongfeng were onto it very quickly. Dongfeng was certainly onto it in the previous race, no one else was. We got onto it on leg 2 going to Cape Town, and then really we were probably more aggressive with it than Dongfeng, and we had a slight edge over them. Suddenly from us always being slower than them, we were fast. We were the quickest boat in the fleet, and the rest of the fleet were probably scratching their heads. And I would say what let it all slip was the Volvo live shows, because all of our data comes off the boat direct into Volvo HQ, and they look at all the data, and some of the commentators were saying, oh, look what they're doing with their keel here, and we were sailing along with our keel canted, only halfway up, and then the other teams got wind of it, and then, by Brazil, or probably was even later than that, it was probably not until towards the end of the race that the other teams were really fully onto it, and then the boat speed differentials in the fleet closed in. So anyway, we've got ourselves to Melbourne in very good shape. 2 leg wins, beating Dongfeng in every leg. Came into Melbourne on Christmas morning though, 5 AM Christmas morning. We arrived in Melbourne. I think there were 6 people on the dock. It wasn't great, but then the weather got good and some people showed up in Melbourne, which was good. And then I guess the race started to starts to hot up. I think people have you've got over the hump of starting the race, and you've got a few legs under the belt, and everyone now they're into it, and they're going to start, and then people start either finding form or really dropping off. And I think in this race, everyone's all the other boats started finding form, and like boats like Brunel, which had really, and Axo Noble, which had both really not contended too well up to this point, and you thought they could both be good boats. They started finding form, and the race hotted up pretty good. Oh, sorry.
Last 2-3 days we just had a crazy one.
Drag racing. 3 hours on, 3 hours on. So I probably should have slept, but I didn't. Leads changed a few times. When you put 2 boats together, you get the best out of each other. We're not where we want to be right now. When you get that scared, you get near.
about the sacrifices in the video.
Sweet ass Wales. Wait back. Better.
Thank you.
Had our moments of glory and moments of really bad.
If we can handle that kind of situation, we can pretty much handle anything out there, so anything after this is going to seem easier, I think.
Yeah, so Christmas time in Melbourne, and you know, I think some teams are feeling pressure. We're semi-relaxed because we've got a good bit under the belt, but it's still, you know, it's time to, there's still a lot of race left. We've done 3 legs, we've got like 7 to go, so there's still a bloody long way to go, and you know, we've got to stay on our game to, you know, still with the aim of winning the race. So now legs 4 and 6, which is essentially Melbourne to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong back to Auckland. Leg 5 was a little motoring race in between, and these didn't go our way at all. Doldrums, which I'm sure some of you might have encountered, but not an easy place to sail, and it really wasn't our forte, to be honest. Not through anyone's fault, but maybe we just got dealt a bad hand. But you know, on the way north, there was a bit of a turnaround in the fleet. Us and Dongfeng sort of led in, and not so well on the way out. But it was, you know, there's just miles and miles and miles of massive clouds and just windless sailing, and then it can go completely on its head. The weather models are all over the place, and whether it's a game of luck or not, I don't know. But it wasn't pleasant to us. I think this is the sort of tracker going in, so I think that was us kind of leading in. Oh, this is where Scallywag did their good one. Scallywag may not have been doing so well on this leg around the Solomon Islands, but got quite a healthy lead fairly soon after by cutting a corner. Most of the fleet gets, you know, you get stuck in massive cloud areas, and they were able to navigate around it. My sister was navigating the boat, so it was probably skill. But yeah, we got dealt a bad hand, and unfortunately, if you get 20 miles behind, there's no catch up. You can be quicker than someone, but 20 miles is a bloody long way. And you know, unless you do get a compression where everyone can come together again, it is really hard to catch up. So we ended up, you know, from this one, we were, you know, a reasonable lead to suddenly being 85 miles behind the leader, which is, yeah, there's no way back from that. I think that leg into there, we would have got a 5th, and then obviously, well, Vesta's had that accident with the fishing boat coming into Hong Kong, so that moved us up one place. But you know, that sort of thing happens. And then on the way back down, oh, that was epic. That one, we again. Scallywag and Axo Noble, if you look at the top left corner, they ended up a long way behind the leaders, and then we just hit a front line which we couldn't cross, and they sailed right up behind us, overtook us all, and then there was that really amazing finish into Auckland. I don't know if anyone saw that, but that was just phenomenal, and that was, yeah, some serious sailing for a few days. But that's how things can change. You can be at one stage there, I think we were hundreds of miles behind, but then it compressed in, and we finished, the whole fleet finished within an hour. So that was pretty crazy. I don't know where I think we got 3rd. Yeah, we got 3rd into Auckland, so it wasn't a disaster. But now, you know, the doldrums were really bad for us, basically. A 4th and a 3rd. Not a disaster, but we were still leading the race, which we were happy with that. But by now, Dongfeng were right on our hammer. Other teams were coming into the race. Scallywag had 1st and a 2nd there. And, you know, suddenly the race was on. We were still pretty happy. We were going into the Southern Ocean now, which we knew we were good at. And we kind of felt that we'll definitely finish on the podium the next leg. Got bonus points available, and we'll just see how we go. And, you know, and then the race is really going to hot up.
Bueno, esperamos salir en 1 hora y media de aquí, hacia el punto de suspensión, y bueno, pues empezaremos a navegar rumbo a Brasil. Muy contento con la tripulación, orgulloso del trabajo que ha hecho todo. La verdad es que creo que ha sido una etapa difícil, manejamos la situación lo mejor posible, estuvimos en regata hasta el Cabo de Hornos y luego ya la mayor se rompía en dos y ya pues, a partir de ahí ya un poco muy.
Yeah, so those who didn't follow, about 4 days out of Auckland, when we were pretty south, the mast track on the mast got damaged. We pulled the track on the mast is in 2 metre sections, and I think it was during a jibe or something. No, maybe not. Anyway, one piece pulled off, which then meant you couldn't just pull the main up and down to reef. We had to put someone up the rig to then feed the batten cars in every time the main went up and down. Obviously, it's freezing cold and windy and gnarly. We had ratchet straps around the mast to hold those bits of track on. So if you wanted to move the main up, you had to take the ratchet straps off, move the main up, put the straps back on. It was an operation which you couldn't do quickly. It was, you know, it was a full-on, full-scale operation just doing that, and obviously risky, damaging more track. So we chucked. It was windy. It was quite a windy Southern Ocean. We were regularly in the late 30s, mid 40s wind speed. So we often sailed. You know, for periods we just put 2 reefs in the main and would use our fractional spinnaker and charge on. There were times often though when we were well underpowered, so we were losing miles, so then got to the stage where we got bored and took a reef out, and that was us. And then we were often times when we were very overpowered with just 1 reef in. So generally we were heavily compromised, and you know, probably had where you would often just put a reef in and out every half an hour, every hour, we were sort of doing it once a day or never. So as a result we ended up on 1 reef way more often than we would like, which essentially led to the mainsail tearing in half. Luckily we were quite near Cape Horn when that happened. But sort of going back, we kind of got a rescue operation, because once the track had fallen off, we had phoned the shore crew and said, look, we've got the track off. So they sent a shore team to Cape Horn to potentially rendezvous with us. And the Spanish regularly stop in Cape Horn with the Volvo race, so they're used to it. All the locals know them there. And when we showed up there, there was, you know, they were kind of ready for us. So they rented that yacht. You can suspend racing, where you just kind of just draw a line in the ocean and return to that point. You can't return within 12 hours. So essentially we had to stop at Cape Horn. We ended up being 14 hours at the time we got back, but we stopped, motored in, got alongside that yacht, got the main off, fixed the main, and fixed some track back onto the mast, and got going again. We were probably only, I don't know, 4 hours behind the leaders at Cape Horn. Not far, very doable. By the time we'd restarted, we were then 18 hours behind them. We then missed a little bit of a weather window, which put us like 3 days behind the leaders. So suddenly, you know, heroes to zeros really. And yeah, it was quite a painful exercise getting up to Brazil. It got very, very light. We ran out of food. I mean, even when we left, we could have taken food on at Cape Horn, but looking at the weather then, it was like, no, we're fine. We may even catch everybody up. But it's just those few hours here and there, and the weather changes, and suddenly, instead of getting in front of a weather system, you're behind it, and then suddenly, you know, you're a long way behind the leaders, and you know, life gets tricky. Obviously, you know, worse on that leg was losing fish. Midway through that Southern Ocean, you know, news came over of man overboard, which nobody wants to hear. And you know, obviously, you know, very sad for those guys on the Scallywag. Over on the right there is Hans, who was lost back in the 2005 race. And I remember, you know, very clearly, because he was our teammate. It was a big storm, and when he was washed over, and unfortunately, it's one of those things that can happen. And you know, both good sailors who'll be missed. So crunch time really for us now in Brazil. We're not leading the race anymore. That last leg was double points, and Brunel had won it. They were getting back on form. Dongfeng did well, I think they were second. But for the first time in this race, we weren't leading it. And you know, we needed to kind of regroup a little bit and you know, just figure out where things had gone a bit wrong and why. I think that Southern Ocean leg, it was a bit of bad luck. We had some track break off the rig, which may have been a fault in it, who knows. And then, you know, as we know with boats, when one thing breaks, it can, you know, compound, and the next thing breaks, and the next thing breaks. But, you know, we had a good team. We had the same team on the boat since the very beginning. Didn't think we had any crew changes. I think we were probably the only team to do that. Lots of other boats seemed to be chopping and changing quite a bit. We were fast. We definitely knew we were quick. Other boats were catching us up, but we knew we were quick. I'd say we sometimes, the doldrums hadn't gone that well for us for whatever reason. I think our decision making through there hadn't always been the best, and that was a tricky one. Whether it's tricky to really pin it. Sometimes I think you've just got to try not to be clever and just go with everybody else and rely on boat speed to get past them, especially when there's so much unknown going on. And other times you've got to rely on being cleverer than other people. And you know, we had one of the best navigators in the world, or probably the best navigator in the world. But you can't always rely on, you know, the computer models and what you can see. Sometimes you're better off just staying with the others and you know, and sailing past them. So we kind of knew what we had to do, and so we went into the next leg knowing that we were quick enough, and you know, we'll get on with it and get it done. But again, doldrums again in the next leg again weren't very kind to us. We got kind of stuffed by some clouds. You know, we're right in the lead pack, and then we got stuffed by some clouds, and suddenly you're 70 miles behind the leaders. You know, having not really done a lot wrong. You know, you all watch the trackers, there's no one spearing off miles off course. It's all just very subtle. One cloud, you drop 10 miles, and then it just changes slightly, and the rich get richer, and suddenly we're 70 miles behind. And, you know, we know that's a big old gap to sort of catch up. But we chipped away in that leg, and to be honest, that was an amazing leg, that one. Just in the last period of it, there was quite a big shutdown and a bit of compression. All the boats were together, and then we managed to slip through the fleet and cross the line first. So yeah, it was quite amazing. And then suddenly we're back into leading the race again. And so we've been on the full roller coaster now. Brunel is still going good. We just beat them across the finish line in that race. So they're moving up the leaderboard rapidly. And obviously Dongfeng and us are in a battle to win the race at this stage, and it's all looking quite exciting. Next leg is transatlantic, and now it's, you know, everyone's quite rested now, I'd say. The leg up from Brazil, you're shorts and t-shirt the whole way except for the final day, and it's, you know, it's not too brutal. We're really over the hump in the race. So everyone, all the teams now have got to grips with their boats. They know how to make them go quick. And, you know, it's full noise. We've got this transatlantic, which is essentially a sprint. You're happy just to give that a nudge. And then 2 more legs after that, which are all sprints. Transatlantic, double points again. And we knew that this was going to be, you know, an important one. But classically, out of America, there's some pretty big decisions to be made early on as the fronts roll over the fleet. And this was looking like on the first night, a front was going to roll over the fleet, and essentially you jibe onto port, coming out in like a southwesterly, front comes over, the wind goes northwesterly, and you jibe. We all know what's going to happen. whoever's last will drive first, because the front will hit them first, whoever's first will drive last. Everyone's kind of in a pack. We all get, essentially the boats further north as well got hit first, so Turn the Tide, they were last, they got jibed out early. Us and Dongfeng were slightly to the north of the fleet, so Dongfeng got jibed out, and then we were kind of hesitant, but then we jibed out. But then what happened after that was quite remarkable, and we ended up with this massive split in the fleet with 3 boats in the north, us, Turn the Tide, and Dongfeng, 4 boats in the south, Scallywag, Greenhalgh, I can't even think of the other boat, Axo Novel, were all in the south. And they never got rolled over by the front, so they were able to remain on the same tack for days, absolutely days, and we were fighting out, trying to get into a better breeze in the north, and these guys never ever got rolled over by the front. Suddenly, you're looking at the tracker every day, or every 6 hours, and we're hundreds of miles behind them. And the biggest issue we had here was, as you would have heard said before, you've got to make sure you win your side of the race. We ended up a little bit down the middle, so we didn't win the north, which was the side we were going. We were going to the north, but we let 2 boats beat us through the north. And obviously, the guys in the south, we couldn't do anything about now, but the 2 boats to the north of us, we let beat us. We'll certainly let them beat us to that side, rather than committing hard to what we were going to do. We were a little bit hesitant, and as a result, Dongfeng got a jump on us in the north. The guys in the south were gone. That wasn't through our choosing. That was just the weather. But we didn't win our little patch of water, which was, a bit of a, suddenly it was real that we couldn't just sail past boats anymore because everyone was catching up speed-wise. Whereas previously, if we were 10 miles behind, we'd expect to sort of roll into people, but now we couldn't. So suddenly it was like, here we go. It's all looking a bit trickier. So suddenly I think we got 4th into, might have been 5th, I think we might have been 5th into Cardiff, and Brunel won, so they were going good, and Dongfeng were probably 2nd or 3rd. Maybe not, maybe Dongfeng were 3rd. So anyway, things were really tight now. Dongfeng were leading the race, and Brunel were right on our hammer. Now, 2 legs to go, Dongfeng are leading the race, Brunel are right behind us, it's all close. The other boats aren't in it now really, no one can, it's between the 3 of us. But now we've got Cardiff round to Gothenburg, it's about 1,500 miles, short leg, 3 to 4 days, it might even be less, maybe 1,000 miles. It's going to be full on, no sleep. Started in no wind, and then we just battled the whole way, and round the top of Scotland we were leading, and then it was across the North Sea. Dongfeng were back, they were struggling speed-wise. They got hammered on one of these reaches where they really dropped off, and then we had Brunel on our hammer, 200 metres behind us. It's 40 knots of wind reaching across the North Sea, and it was the first time I would say we really got overtaken boat speed-wise. They were able to sail up behind us and then basically choose which side of us to go. And for a whole day, we were luffing them, bearing away on them, luffing them, just to try to keep, loads of wind, just to try to keep them at bay. But then eventually they managed to break through to leeward of us and just creep out on us. They beat us over the finish line by about 30 or 40 seconds into Sweden. But it was pretty amazing, that much wind. Maybe we had weed around the keel, who knows, I don't think so. We were doing everything we could, but they were obviously just doing something. They had a gear we didn't have, and they were able to just squeeze by us. So we were 2nd into Sweden. Dongfeng were down a bit, but Brunel, three leg wins in a row for Brunel. 3 leg wins in a row. So they were absolutely on fire. And what this meant was, so that's the import series, which we not really relevant. So going into the final leg now, Gothenburg to The Hague, 3 boats were on equal points. Bearing in mind the last 4 races I'd done before this, the winner had been decided before the last leg. The previous race at Abu Dhabi had won with a leg to spare. Before that, the French had won with a leg to spare, Ericsson won with a leg to spare, ABN AMRO won with a leg to spare. So suddenly, there's normally a dominant team. We've now got 3 boats on equal points going into the final leg. The inshore points, normally what they say is, if boats finish on equal points, then the race is decided on the inshore series. We had a good run of inshore series, so we had that squared away. But now the fact that everyone was tied going into the final race meant that the whole inshore series was actually kind of a waste of time, because it wasn't going to decide anything. There wasn't going to be a points tie at the end of the race. So anyway, 3 of us going into the final leg. It's just whoever beats whoever, Sweden down to The Hague, and essentially, yeah, more than a year of work, all resting on just this final leg, and it was pretty exciting. So they gave us a slightly unusual course. It's not great to see on there, but they wanted us to arrive into Holland on a Saturday lunchtime, and I think we started on a Wednesday lunchtime. So they sent us down. First of all, we went down to Denmark. So we started in Stockholm, in Gothenburg, and went north up to a mark in Norway, which was just, I think it was a virtual mark, just because they did all the routing, because they wanted us to come down to Denmark down here, Aarhus. See that mark there? That was in a harbour in Denmark, which we went in and sailed around as part of the leg. So all the boats went in there, there were people everywhere, it was amazing. So first of all, we went north up to Norway, and then raced down round this mark in this harbour, and then around to Holland after that. It was a pretty full-on race, and all the time, again, you know, most boats were in sight of each other for the majority of the race. And us and Dongfeng got stretched out on the rest of the fleet. I think we still had a pretty good edge over the fleet, and we got stretched out. Brunel they were struggling a little bit. They weren't far away, but they were kind of looking like us and Dongfeng. We overhauled Dongfeng about halfway through the leg and just had a 1 mile lead on them, half a mile lead. And then was crunch time, the final big decision of the whole race, which essentially was the defining moment of the entire ocean race. We were coming down, so if you can see the blue line and the red line are the 2 modelling options to pass around this TSS exclusion zone here. And you can see it was super windy. We're about where those diamonds are off the top of Denmark there, that's Denmark. And we had to choose whether to come to the east of this TSS zone or through this gap into the finish line here. The models had it marginally favoured to come this way, because, by half an hour. And we were leading, we were reaching across on starboard, windy now, going fast, and essentially we were like, well, we're just going to go whichever way second place goes. We're leading, we don't get to choose. Whichever way second's going, we'll just cover them, and then third place will go the opposite way, because they're not going to follow. And it's so close on timing, which way you go. It doesn't really, third place will always take a chance. So Dongfeng were erring to go the eastern option. They were, a mile and a half behind us. So we just kept going down that way, and we came hammering down this Danish coast, aiming to come around this corner here, and then sail up the Dutch coast into the finish line. About halfway down that Danish coast, there's another time, all those red bits are exclusion zones, there's a wind farm. And as we were coming down there, it was like, we can't go inside it. It's very shallow. So we just sort of diverted outside of it. And it was windy and wavy, 20, 25 knots, and they were saying there's going to be less than half a metre under the keel inside the wind farm. So we're like, no, we'll go outside that. Everyone's knackered by now, with 2 days of no sleep. And anyway, kind of a critical moment, Dongfeng dived down inside that wind farm and went through the shallow water, which essentially, because we were then going to have to BMG down to get to the waypoint down here, essentially put them ahead of us. So at that moment we had to change our mind, and instead of going to the east, we knew that we couldn't beat Dongfeng to the east of that way, to the east of this TSS, so we had to change our mind and go to the west, which was, you know, pretty bad thing to do at this stage. So anyway, halfway down that leg we diverted fairly dramatically and ended up coming across to the west and coming through this gap here, which let Brunel past us and Alphamedica past us. We then had to fight like hell, and we overtook Brunel and Alphamedica again. Obviously we didn't know where Dongfeng were. Around this sort of time, the latest weather models were now showing that going to the west was better, la-di-da. So anyway, we came in, you know, we battled for the next good while, and came into the finish line, not knowing at all, obviously, where Dongfeng were. And let me just go back to that. Yeah, so not knowing where Dongfeng were, we had to, you know, sail. I guess people were watching the track live, which we don't get any of the information on. So we had no clue where Dongfeng were. The weather routing was now showing that we were going to win the race, and we didn't know. You know, we didn't have a clue where they were. All we did know was that the wind wasn't quite lining up with what the weather model had said. We were actually now having to VNG run from here down to The Hague, which is down here. And essentially Dongfeng were able to reach across, so we saw them eventually just crossing our bow by about 2 miles, and that was us. We jived into the finish. We finished like 6 or 7 minutes behind them, and yeah, I mean, kind of heartbreaking really, but it kind of boiled down to essentially not the whole race, but we had a lot of bad luck, and things go wrong, but not going through the shallow bit of water off Denmark. 3 boats went through there, and they all said that they saw less than half a metre. Dongfeng were crash diving through shallow water. It was pretty dangerous, but it's, you know, you've got to take some risk. Yeah, not doing that, you know, kind of not going through there or then going through there, kind of won them the race. Had the weather lined up with the wind model, i.e. being a bit more round, it was meant to be a bit more in the north in the end, which meant we would have reached in and Dongfeng would have been VMG running, then we would have crossed them by 2 or 3 miles. So we left plenty on the table, you know, many legs ahead, you know, with the Southern Ocean, the transatlantic not going great, and the doldrums not always going great for us. But it was a bloody close race, and that last leg came down to a very difficult decision of going through some shallow water or not. And you know, had we gone through it, I'm sure history would have been slightly different. But either way, we were, you know, happy with what we did, and you live with the decisions you make. So yeah, all in all, it was a pretty full-on race, which it was just so close. 3 boats on equal points going into the last leg, and you know, no one could afford to make a mistake. And yeah, so anyway, that's me for the last 15 years, I guess. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free, or welcome to adjourn to the bar. Hipson's got a raffle.
Thanks, Rob. That was very enlightening. I'd just like to thank Rob. And one of the things I took away from it, like he's talking 1,500 miles with no sleep, right? How many people have been to Bali on a boat? That's a Bali race right there, guys. How long did it take you to get there? Yeah, try not sleeping. But anyway, we've got some couple of prizes. First prize is some goodies and a service voucher and blah blah blah. And we've got a picture from that Rob's kindly given us of a nice aerial shot of Mapfre. So if you can, you're drawing them out. Read them out, mate. Just one for now. What do you got?
Hold on. Purple A37. Yeah.
Oh, no, redraw. You can't give it to Billy Brownlee. And you can have this one as well, Billy. This one, that is a photo. That's fast. Rob can hand that one over. Oh, good on you, Billy. We'll do another one. Rob, got a couple of 2 spot prizes here, just cheeky door prizes.
Oh.
Whoa.
I was going to say the same again. No, purple A12.
Oh, Billy.
Self-hydrated.
Yeah, we'll leave this one. Ryan's sails a 32-footer double-handed. And goes hard. He does very well. Yeah.
Again?
Yeah, one more.
Black A1.
A1.
Redraw.
Redraw. Oh, hang on.
Here we go.
Here we go. Thanks, Seth. Enjoy. Okay, well, thanks, guys. If while we're here, we do actually have one more special prize. Keep getting a little bit of stick because I don't hand out enough hats. So, Michelle Kirk, can you come and grab your hat, please? That's all right. Well, thanks a lot to Rob for coming over. It's always a pleasure to be able to have a night like tonight just for our local fleet. And Rob, thanks so much for coming in. Look, if any of you guys have any questions, maybe not now, but just feel free to get in touch with us because you know, he's very easily accessible, you know, and you know, we can pass on some of his knowledge to clients and so forth, just to make everybody's sailing a lot more enjoyable. Thanks a lot, Rob. Couple of beers at the bar, it's all good.
Thanks, Ed.
You're good. You're good.